I'm going to start with something we did at Buster's a long time ago. And it's, I want you to name these brands for yourselves and just think their names for yourselves. Now, I want you to name these plants. Anyone? Trees, maybe? I grew up in the age of excess. All of my friends were making money. It was the beginning of corporate consumerist culture. It was pop culture. And everyone wanted to win in life, whatever that meant, right? This culture told me that everything was possible as long as I had the money. Deep down, it also told me that I was alone, competing against everything and everybody. It told me that the bigger something is, the better. The shinier something is, the better. And the louder something is, the better. It told me that sugar was good. It told me that junk food was good, and also that plastic was good. It told me I had all the choice in the world. And this was a well-functioning system. Call it democracy. It also told me that I shouldn't worry. There's no questions to be asked. Please just move along. Everything is fine. Just keep shopping. So, today we live in a society that has been exposed to more information than any time in human history. You know, people say between 3,000 to 10,000 ads per day, if you include digital. Can you imagine, like, there's 350 PowerPoint presentations being done every second. Like 350. Who's creating these and who's seeing these, right? It's like greenhouse emissions for our minds. It's almost like, can you imagine, like global warming inside our heads? What are the consequences of this amount of information in the stratosphere and inside our minds in that sense, you know? And maybe most importantly, what is the consequences of images that we don't have a defense mechanism against? John Berger used to say that seeing comes before words. And do you understand? It's like, if you don't want to read something, you don't read it. But if you don't want to see something, you don't really have an option. The images come in whether you want it or not. And isn't it interesting that we are never taught how to read images? No one sits down with us in school or parents or whatever and teach us how to read images, you know? It's interesting that Susan Sontag used to say that photographs, they are always like a crop of reality. You know, when you look at war photographs, for example, they should be an interesting reminder of what actually happened in reality. It should be something to make you remember that there is a crop and there was a whole history to be understood. And but today we don't remember the history. We just remember the photographs. It's just the image that sort of stays with us. So, Eduardo Galeano, if you guys don't know him, he's a Uruguayan writer. He died a couple of years ago. He's one of my heroes. And there's an interesting story that he says that a father comes home from work one day, and he's sad. And he sits down with his son, and he says, "Son, I have something important to tell you. Something happened today." And the son sits down, is like, "What happened, Papa?" And he says, "Grandfather died." And the son had watched gazillions of hours of television, looks excited, turns to him and says, "Oh my God, who killed him?" So, where are we heading? I mean, I'm confused. I don't know if you guys are confused with today's amount of information, but can you imagine 10 more years of Facebook and Netflix series and endless levels of Candy Crush, you know? I play Candy Crush, and my son is 10 years old. He came up to me and said, "Dad, you've been playing this game for a long time. When does it end?" And I told him, it never does end. It's like an endless game. It makes no sense. Guys, apologies for, I don't do this very often. I might get nervous. And then I told my friend that was doing this, and he said, "Pretend you're doing like karate." Like, so when I'll be like, So my name is Pedro, and I'm the creative director of Adbusters magazine. Adbusters is part of the magazine is part of Adbusters Media Foundation. And this was founded by Kalle Lantz and Bill Schmaus in '89. And basically, how did it all begin? The Canadian logging industry was doing an advert for it was a greenwash advert, what we call it at Adbusters, a mindfuck. It's pretty much like this. They said it, we have to save a forest. And in order to save a forest, we have to cut it down. You know, and Kalle and Bill, they did an advert to respond to that, as a reply to that. And then they did the ad, they got the money to air it, they took it to CBS, and said, "Okay, we want to air this," and they say, "Sorry, you can't air this because you're not a corporation." So basically, that was, with this, the foundation was born, you know. Adbusters magazine is a reader-supporter magazine. It's a journey, the magazine is a journey. And the fact that it's ad-free, it allows you to tell you one single story. And ask yourselves this question: when was the last time you spent some time without looking at ads, without being interrupted by ads? When you're flicking through a normal magazine and an ad comes up, your brain goes like, I don't need to see this, you know? It goes into, you lower your guard, you know? And in the sense, it's, and when you don't have that, when you have this one single line telling you, it without commercial interruptions, it's like a film. It's like, a short film or something like this, you know? So the magazine, by being a journey, it could be like the journey of a person, individual, living in these crazy times, and could also be the journey of humanity. You know, it's like, what are we doing here as a species? What is our project on planet Earth? Why are we doing what we're doing, and where we are headed? The subtitle of the magazine is called The Journal for the Mental Environment. And so just like you can pollute the rivers, chop down trees and forests, you can also pollute your minds. So how many times have you picked up your phone today? Do you feel anxious? How's your sleeping? Do you grind your teeth at night? All these things connect with the amount of information that we take in. So a huge inspiration for Adbusters was the French Situationists. Again, if you don't know who they are, please look them up. They are partially responsible to help the riots in Paris in 1968. They're sort of an art group, and they came up with a huge, interesting critique of capitalism and consumerist culture. And they did a lot of graffiti, and one of the graffitis that I most love is, "You can't buy happiness, steal it." And they also wanted to install urinals in churches, and they wanted to put switches on lampposts. They believe creativity could spark new ways to see. So Adbusters was particularly inspired by the concept of detournament. And detournament, I mean, can be described as, rerouting, hijacking, And it's a technique that really picked up in the 90s and 2000s because Adbusters was hacking this image-based corporate culture, We got a lot of shit from a lot of people saying that you can't be a glossy magazine discussing anti-glossy issues, But it worked. It's what we call culture jam, It's when you use the systems to hack the mainstream narrative, And this helped crack a little bit this narrative of mainstream capitalism. So I want to pick 1977 because I think it's an interesting symbolic year that talks about ideas of utopias and dystopias, something that to discuss what's to come. So I'll flick through a quick things that happened in this year, right? So the Commodore PET this is the first personal computer for you to take home and have a computer at home is released. Apple becomes a corporation. Punk movement is in full swing. Nevermind the Bollocks by Sex Pistols is released with the anthem, No Future, God Save the Queen, No Future. And The Clash is also releasing its debut album. So you have Star Wars releasing at the cinemas, Close Encounters of a Third Kind releasing at cinemas, Atari second generation is launched. This is interesting. This is Have Blue. It's Lockheed Martin. So if you look up the first top defense contractor of the US military budget, it's Lockheed Martin. This is the biggest weapons manufacturer ever. And in 1977, they created the first test flights for Have Blue, which was the predecessor of the Nighthawk. It's the famous invisible airplane. And basically, the section of Lockheed Martin that created this plane is called Skunk Works. And I really wanted to show you the logo of one of the biggest manufacturers of arms logo. Isn't that cute? Makes no sense, though. So NASA Space Shuttle Enterprise does its first flight. Harvey Milk gets elected, is the first openly gay politician in California history. Amnesty International wins the Nobel Peace Prize. Elvis dies. Groucho Marx dies. Charlie Chaplin dies. And then we have the new hero being born. John Travolta. Saturday Night Fever. Staying alive. Okay. This is also the year that John Oliver, that's the guy here, Kanye West, this guy here, Macron, right? And Donald Trump Jr., they're born. So it's also the year that the Voyager, NASA creates the Voyager 1 and 2. And the Voyager, I don't know if you guys know this, but this is the human-made spacecraft that it's the farthest human-made spacecraft that we have created. So between here and the interstellar medium, I'm not sure what that means, but it's just the farthest human-made space probe that we have created that is still going and sending back information to us. And in the spacecraft, there's this, what's called the gold-plated disk. And this is a very interesting project because it has images and it has sounds of humanity. Here it shows you how to play the disk. And in there you have pretty much like sounds of nature, birds chirping, waves crashing, the sound of wind. And you also have like pictures of what is home and what is human beings. How do we plan things? How do we eat? How do we construct things, right? And that's such an interesting project, if you come to think. How do we represent humanity to intelligent life forms? Which images do we choose? And so the story goes. Carl Sagan was responsible for doing a track list, a playlist for aliens, right? So, isn't that cool? It's like you do mixtapes for aliens. It's like, what would you put into a mixtape? And he wanted to put the Beatles, right? I mean, I'm all good. He wanted to actually put Here Comes the Sun. Not my favorite song, I would say, and kind of, it's Here Goes the Sun. I don't know, it doesn't really make any sense. He wanted to put the song, but EMI didn't allow it because of copyright. And that's, seriously? Oh yes, the aliens. We have to make money. It makes no sense, but it does tell you a lot about the world that we're living in, that the Beatles cannot represent humanity to intelligent life forms outside this planet because of copyright issues. So, aliens. How do you explain the world that we live in to an alien? I think that this is an interesting question. Aliens is always like, okay, I don't understand anything, explain me everything. It's like, okay, how do we do that? So I thought about maybe trying to pick two images that could actually talk about how the world, how can everything be explained. First image, it's the system we have created. This can be described as humanity's project on Earth. At the heart of the project, it's finance, and maximizing profits, and everything else sits around it, This is an inexcusable way of how things works. Countries goes to war, and people get killed if you try to change this. The second image is a kind of simplification and short story of how profit growth and capital progress, is just going up forever, And this is a set of rules that have ruled the world for such a long time, Everything around us serves this graph. The more, the better. That's the narrative. We have come to respect, follow, and worship this idea. This is the center of the human species experiment that we're doing on planet Earth. So, and thinking about it, it's of extreme arrogance that we as a species gets to decide who lives and who dies. It's not like we should respect them. No, we're like doing whatever we are doing. We have the right to perpetual growth. They don't. What makes us being able to decide such a thing? And in the pursuit of this agenda, we're pretty much killing everything standing on our way. We should do a Disney film where we are actually the villains, It's this whole thing about forever and ever. It's like we can grow economically forever and ever. Where are we heading with this, So in the 80s and 90s, it was all about this, growing up was all about this, It was the invention of Hollywood blockbusters, franchises, the glory of consumerism, MTV. All symbols embrace this. You have Michael Jackson, and you have like Madonna doing Pepsi ad commercials. You have the films sort of showing that, pretty much talking about the narratives of a prosperous future, the promise of a prosperous future through abundance. And governments promise that. They promise prosperity by trusting the markets. Margaret Thatcher said, there's no such thing as society. And Ronald Reagan complimented, say, government is the problem. Deregulate, deregulate, deregulate. And it's an interesting moment because there was also a shift within public relations took control of all areas. Everything became a business. Everything became a product. Education became a business. Health became a business, became a product. And the most valuable asset a company could have was its image, Nike doesn't sponsor culture. Nike is the culture. So the market expanded, multiculturalism was a thing, the internet came along, And to help us with the attention span, so did Prozac. And slowly, something started to form in the 90s. Rage Against the Machine was closing down the New York stock market with Michael Moore. Nirvana was telling us all to load up our guns and bring your friends. The Zapatistas rebellion was silently exploding in Mexico, and the activists and anti-capitalists narrative was getting momentum all the way up to the Battle of Seattle, where they actually managed to shut down the WTO. And this was the war that Adbuses grew into. It was part of that. It was hacking mass media. It was creating advertisements, and counter jamming. We would tackle advertising campaigns for the first time and talk back. You have to understand that back then there was no internet the way we have today. This was a meme before the meme. It was how can you? Maybe the biggest idea is how do you break the monopoly on the production of meaning? And we only had TV and radio. You couldn't really talk back, So all you're seeing here, pretty much, it's stuff they printed in the magazines. Sometimes they put it in billboards. So this is Joe Camel doing chemotherapy from having lung cancer. And the counter jamming had to do with images that we had, and we would print or we put in billboards or do posters. And the different thing that we started to create was the idea of a campaign. And Adbuses created a few very successful campaigns. One of them was TV Turn-Off Week, for you to spend a week without TV, and Buy Nothing Day. Buy Nothing Day is a holiday on Black Friday, where you're encouraged to spend 24 hours without shopping. And it's not really about, you can't consume anything. It's about asking yourselves, what do you need and what do you want? And just do a pause within our lifestyles and ask yourselves, how much stuff and shit do we actually buy, And the interesting thing for me is that the way how these campaigns were done, for me, was ahead of its time, because Adbuses would launch the Spark, and the cities, each city will pick it up and do their thing, whatever they wanted to take their direction. It would take a life on its own in that sense, And in most times, for example, in London, they were dressed up as zombies and walk into supermarkets and just bump into people. And in Japan, they were dressed up as Santa Claus and sits down in the shopping district area and meditate. It's such a powerful image, And I think that this is the interesting thing about campaigns, that Adbuses wasn't interested in having credit. He wasn't interested in controlling it. He was interested in creating counter-narratives and let them expand. And this is about not having control, but about losing control. It's about learning how to let go. And let go is not easy. It's something you have to practice every day. It's like a muscle that needs to be flexed every day. Which kind of brings me to our most successful campaign, which is Occupy Wall Street. So we were seeing the Arab Spring happen in 2010, and we were seeing the Spanish Encampadas happen in 2010 and 11. And we're thinking, how can we actually bring this to America? And somebody came up with the hashtag Occupy Wall Street between the conversations. Adbuses has about 100,000 subscribers and collaborators, so that's a lot of emails back and forth and people sending ideas, and it's always been like that. It's always been kind of like open for people to sort of share ideas and stuff like this. And I think back in 2011, in our August issue, we printed this poster. And it's just said, what is our one demand? Hashtag Occupy Wall Street, September 17th, being 10th. And this is it. This image started the Occupy global movement. One image. Again, it tells you so much of the image-based culture that we're in. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that we created the movement. It was a lot of the timing and different people who showed up in Zuccotti Park in New York and started. But this image was the spark, was in the right moment at the right time. And again, it tells us a lot about. So the movement exploded, took its own path worldwide, in each place a different thing. And we never really had money. At Buses, it wasn't really about money. It's like an NGO. We get money and we spend the money. And with Occupy, it was crazy. It had so many subscriptions, it had so much attention, it had so much media coverage that all the money that came in, we invested in a book. So we're like, we're poor. Hey, we're rich. No, hey, we're poor. So it was a little bleak. And we invested in a book about economy. And I think that from when he started, when I told you about that Adbusters was about environmental, and then he quickly understood that it's about a mental environmentalism. And when he came to Occupy, he understood that it's not really just about mental environmentalism, but it's also about economics. So he did this book called Mean Warfare, The Creative Discussion of Neoclassical Economics. And it was published in several places, different countries. I think there's a German version, there was a Turkish version, a Spanish one, and this is a few spreads of the book. And this is David Shigley and Chris Jordan. That's an actual picture. This is rice plantations in East and West. And this is the hardcover version. It's made out of sandpaper. Because it's an economics book, it was going to go to the economics section in libraries. So when you pull it in, pull it out of the shelf, it destroys everything around it. So that was the dream. Welcome to 2019, and everything has turned into a fucking nightmare. No one believes in governments, politicians, institutions, media anymore. We live in a world where the average worker of Starbucks would have to work for 1,000 years to make what the CEO makes in 1 year. 1,000 years. Think about that. 26 billionaires own more money than half of the population of the world. You can fit 26 people in a minibus. Silicon Valley managed motto, they have a motto, it's called Move Fast and Break Things, and they managed to use that to turn us all into zombies, working for them for free. We are not users, we are workers. That's what we do for them, for free. Since 2008, we live in an austerity regime created by banks that has exploded and thrown the government and populations into an unforeseen economic crisis. And it's exposed further by the Panama Papers and Paradise Papers. The money is not moving. There's the rise of populist regimes, painting themselves as the real revolutionaries, as the real anti-systemic, and there's a sort of an opportunistic view from neoliberal capitalism to find a way out of this moment we find ourselves as in. We're in the midst of the 6th mass extinctions. Polar bears are now eating dolphins. Half of the Great Barrier Reef is gone, bleached. And there's a garbage patch in the South Pacific, the size of a fucking continent. This is a completely clusterfuck meltdown. what happened in the last 40 years? What was the promise and what was what did we got? You know? What was the expectation and what was the reality? We forget that capitalism is a story. We forget that it's an idea and that our world is still shaped by the stories. This is why creativity is as dangerous as never before. It's the most uncontrollable of the human forces. Every leader is a symbol. Every government is a brand. The meme wars we're actually living on is a battle of narratives. So on the horizontality of networks, suddenly one person can create a seismic mind bomb in an international scale. All ideas counts. Everything is allowed. The ice bucket challenge. That was one guy who wanted to help a friend and created this idea of getting an ice bucket and turning it into his head. And it became international movement. There was one guy wanting to help a friend. Today we have the information to understand how the world works. We can see what's lying in the backstage, you know? You can see the connections between the China-polluted cities all the way to the GMO soybeans fed to oversized cows, stock options for pharma markets and industries sponsoring art exhibitions, passing through the epidemic of suicide rise, passing through the beauty industry and cancer. Everything is connected, and the system is broken. Masanobu Fukuoka, that's the father of permaculture. He wrote this very interesting book called One Straw Revolution. And he said something really interesting. He said, you can't use pesticides because pesticides kill spiders. And without spiders, you don't have the spider webs in the plantations. And without the spider webs in the plantations, you don't have the dew that goes through in the morning in the spider webs. And without this dew, you don't have the light that goes inside these droplets of water and shine lights in these plantations. And without this light, you have no poetry. And that reminds me of something someone said about design, that you never design just a chair. It's always a chair within a room in the house, a house in the street, a street in the city, a city in the country, a country in the world. So for us at Adbusters, it's about strategizing. It's about meeting up. It's about thinking about the chair and the words, about thinking about poetry. It's learning how to let go and lose control. If there's something for you guys to remember from this talk, I want you to think about the youth movement going on today about climate change, you know. Mothership Earth is on fucking fire. The debate is over. This is the future we're giving to the kids. So if they're angry, give them space. They are the superheroes of our times. Don't lose heart. Remember to dance. Not everything is lost. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
Heavy stuff. I also really can recommend the book. We got it a year ago, and it's also a brilliant piece of design, of storytelling. It's really an economic book. I started reading and said, I'm not the target group. This is for students of the economics. So that was a mind fuck in its own way, and I really loved it. Before questions come in from the audience, there's one that I immediately asked myself when I first got into contact with Adbusters, because I'm part also of the advertising and the design industry. Our agency works for a few of those brands. Mm-hmm. Should we immediately stop to do that?
I was talking about this. This is a different thing. I don't want to answer that question. Goodbye.
I mean, this is probably on the minds of a few people here. So what's in this for us?
I work. I'm a freelance. I mean, if Adbusters paid me, I have to do freelance work as well to pay my bills. But it's interesting that on our heads we said, okay, pay our bills is an excuse to do the kind of work that we do. While today we should really think what is the consequences of the work that we're doing, you know, in design, in product design, in advertising, and so forth, you know. And I mean, don't get me wrong, it's kind of like one thing is for you to work with accent, hiding, doing a PR campaign to fuck up climate change foundations in storytelling. You know, this is one thing. The other thing is kind of like you doing the work that you have to do. I mean, it's a capitalist society. This is the only game in town. There's no alternative. You know, I'll have to sit here via Skype and be naked to kind of say I don't participate in this society. You know, so in a sense, I think you have to do whatever you have to do. But what I want you to think is that look around. Look what's the state of the system that we have created is at the moment, you know? And think, how can you help? Anything can help. Anyone can help. Anyone can come up with one idea and really change things, you know? So I would say that you have to pay your bills, yeah. But what's in your heart? You know, how do you, on that subject matter, my heart is full, my bank account is empty. So.
Okay. Die Belohnung des Sprechers ist die Frage. So, haben wir Fragen aus dem Publikum? Komm, es ist zwar Samstag früh, aber ihr müsst ein bisschen in die Pushen kommen. Es ist nicht nur zurücklehnen hier und konsumieren. Wer hat was? Hier drüben haben wir die erste. Herzlichen Glückwunsch. Erste Frage auf der C14.
Hi, my question is, how do you teach your children to deal with this capitalism?
Wow.
I myself have children, and
we have all day here, no problem.
I find it. I have a 10-year-old, and one thing that I always try to explain to him is I try to separate things. I try to make him read images, like what I was saying, that it really, it's a crazy thing that we are never taught how to read images. We should be taught how to read images in kindergarten, you know? It's like there's people wanting to manipulate you with this, you know? So every time we're watching television and ads come up, I take the sound off because I want him to look at the images. And we start making this game where we dub what's actually happening, and it's fun, you know. I guess and we go to the supermarket, and he says, "Hey, I want to buy this because it has a Spider-Man on the package." And I always try to tell him, you know, it's like food is one thing, toys are another. They don't correlate, you know. So in a sense, I guess it's kind of like trying to explain. It's a complex word, you know. I guess it's difficult, but we have to try to sort of be aware of these forces they're kind of playing all the time. And at the same time, it's interesting because the world is really changing. So racial issues, gender issues, post-colonial issues today You know, they have to be you have to bring those in and discuss those ideas. So I took him to see Black Panther the other day, and we came out of the films, and he looked at me and said, "Dad, what happened to Africa?" He was like, why Africa happened like this? And we had a really big conversation about, you know, there was a country and they got invaded and it got robbed and people got taken out and, you know, driven miles away from their countries. And it really makes you think, you know, like, what do we do now with that? Shouldn't we talk about that, you know? Shouldn't we maybe pay them back something? Hello, Belgium. Hello, England. So forth.
So,
yeah.
education and bringing up your children will be basically about ad busting all day with them. So a lot of fun there. Do we have other questions from the audience? Here is one. There's a microphone coming up. Just wait a second so we can all hear it.
Thank you. You told the story how Adbusters came to be, and how did you come into contact with Adbusters? What's that story?
I like to think I'm very privileged to do the work I believe in, and this is not many people that can actually do that, so I truly understand that I am on a privileged position to get paid to do the work I believe in. But then again, I always fought for that. I always believed that. I went to work for a British designer, Jonathan Barnbrook, when I was like in early 20s. And he really taught me a lot about design, how much you should admire who you work with. There's no point in doing work for you don't admire, because otherwise you're just lying to yourself. And you're gonna probably get hired to do more of that work. So in that sense, I kind of, with him, I met at Busters, and I met Kalle Lans. And Kalle, I have to tell you guys, he's 75 and he's got more energy than all of us combined here. You know, it's the first issue I was asked, I wanted to do the whole issue in the JPEG, low resolution, corrupted resolution look. It was the only magazine I could do that, actually. No other magazines would allow us to do that. We'd get pictures of Paris Hilton, and we would Photoshop them with their eyes, like, it was like a lot of fun. But he would sit next to me, and he'd be like, "Fuck it up." I was like, oh my God. And I'm the young here. I'm the guy who's supposed to be like, "Yeah, let's do this, rock and roll." And he was like, "Nah, do it more." I was like, oh my God, who is this old guy? Super, super energetic and super fantastic. And most of the times I look at things and I disagree with him, it's like, "No, you're crazy. What are you thinking about this?" Next day I'll be like, "Shit, he was right." You know, so it's kind of like, it's fantastic to sort of work with people like him.
And maybe you can just say something about how can people participate in Adbusters, because as I understand it, it's not that you guys produce all the work.
Yes.
So that might be interesting for some people who want to join, maybe.
Yeah, we don't commission things. This is super interesting because a lot of people kind of say, "Hey, can you commission me to do something?" And we are like, "I'm sorry, we don't commission. You have to work yourself. You have to send the work yourself in. And usually it's personal work. It's not something that you'll be probably going to make money out of it. So it's if you have an idea, if you know, like something comes up and you do a sketch, you do something, send it to me, send it to Kalle, send it to the office. And if it connects with the story that we are mounting for every issue, we publish it, you know, and we'll get you some magazines and some other stuff, but we don't have a lot of money to pay anything, so it's kind of difficult.
Okay. One last question from the audience. Here's one in the front. Microphone coming up. Running. Microphone marathon here.
Thank you. My question is about the difficulty in actually causing change. I myself, I'm trying to change the way we have traffic in this town in the last year, and it's incredibly hard to do that, and not because of the big companies. So it's quite easy if you have a company as a villain, because people like the David against Goliath thing. But the people who fight the project of bringing bicycles and public transportation forward, are not the companies. These are normal people, people who got addicted to this consumerism thing, who lived themselves into the way consumerism taught us to be over the last decades. And it's incredibly hard to change something if a lot of people around you think that's the way it has to be.
Very good question. The meme wars I was explaining about. When you fight a meme wars, you're fighting narratives. There's, it's not only, the way how we think is that it's not with one message that you're going to change things. It's with 1,000 messages that you change things. And they have to come from everywhere. You have to kind of create a lot of different approaches to different things. It's the multiplicity that really counts. To give a really bad example, the Trump presidency, when the Russians were getting paid, were paying Facebook to place ads. Most of these ads came from the Internet Research Agency in Moscow. These guys were doing 3,000 ads per day, 3,000 memes per day. I'm not saying that you should do 3,000 memes per day, but I'm just saying that you have to think of different ways to kind of like get this. And there's different narratives. There's the narrative of you standing there using a public space. There's the narrative of the corporation. There's the narrative of climate change. There's the narrative of the students on Fridays for the Future and so forth. You know, there's all these different narratives that have to be worked upon. But you can't do it yourself. It's about meeting up. The Zapatistas, when Trump won, the Zapatistas, they reached out a call out saying, go out and meet people. Look people eye to eye. Because this is actually what's going to change. The sense of belonging, the sense of inspiring, the sense of actually doing the work that communities do, this is actually what's going to change. Not us sitting in the back of the keyboards and sending memes to each other. You know, it's the whole package, I believe. You know, it's like this multiplicity of ideas rather than just one idea. But let's talk more about that. I like that idea.
Yeah, and again, tomorrow in your workshop that we are very happy that you hold that at the agency, there's a chance for a few people at least to get into a more informal setting with you.
Fantastic.
And to learn something out there. And for the rest, we can just say, please take subscription to the magazine because there are actual manuals in there, how to do stuff. I like those a lot. So thanks again, Pedro Inoue, for being here.
Thanks, Steve.